not here to tell anybody how to think or what opinions they should have, but I think we should call a spade a spade. If you tell me that being trans is a mental illness, an abomination, then I want you to own up to the fact that that way of thinking is colonial and white supremacist. Because if you're going to say that to me, you need to be prepared to say that same thing to all of the indigenous societies all over the world who have more than two genders. I think if you were to do that, the colonial and white supremacist nature of that way of thinking would be really, really clear.
Haven't we all heard the claim, the white man brought misogyny to the people of color, who are perfectly accepting of women, gay people, and minorities until colonization?
Is a colonial construct, not just a social one.
No, but let's talk about it. Hi, my name's Evan, this is Blackademics, and today we're going to be talking about the coloniality of gender. I love Miss Christina's content, and go follow her page. She was responding to a TERF who was arguing that womanhood is uniquely defined by menstruation. And the concept of gender that we have that relies on the ability to sexually reproduce is colonial. A ton of writers have talked about this. For example, an anthropology report in the 50s showed that 64% of societies across the world have some sort of normative homosexual behavior. Many pre-colonial cultures across the world recognized and celebrated non-cisgendered, non-binary, and non-heterosexual orientations. This is because a lot of times in these societies, gender and sexuality was distinct from social organization and classification. I'm not saying they didn't have concepts of gender, but that their understandings of gender were not relying on the ability of heterosexual couples to reproduce, nor was it significant in their social hierarchy. Writers such as Paula Gunn Allen and Michael J. Horswell talk about the ubiquity of queer orientations in Indigenous American cultures. They found that non-cisgendered orientations occurred in over 150 tribal nations. Oyeranke Oyewumi, apologies for the pronunciation, argued that the Yoruba words for man and women are literally mistranslated. She translates them more specifically as female anatomically, or ana-female and ana-male, because those body features were not an organizing social principle in Yoruba culture before colonization. Maria Lugones actually wrote a lot about this. European colonialism and capitalism brought Western hegemonic understandings of binary gender and heterosexuality to the global majority. Specifically, that gender is an important social organization that is predicated on your ability to reproduce. Indigenous practices of gender and sexuality were suppressed to more easily control resources and human capital. She refers to this as the modern/colonial gender system. It not only destroyed the diverse gender and orientational practices of communities around the world, it also positioned those communities as inferior to the civilized West. So is gender made up? No. But in many non-Western societies, gender was not a major social principle of organization, and it did not correlate with the ability to reproduce. I hope this was helpful.
Anyone with even a basic idea of history knows that that is not true. The white man didn't need to come to China to tell them whose feet to bind, or go to Africa to say whose clitoris needed to be chopped off. Misogyny is not an import of Western colonization, but is instead present in pretty much every culture. The reason why can be argued over, but the result is obvious. Women are oppressed, denigrated, and abused for their reproductive ability, regardless of their ability to reproduce. Western culture still benefits from pretending that female oppression is a problem from other people, allowing many to avoid confronting stalled progress in their own countries. For example, when a feminist brings up the difficulties a single mother has, or the hurdles women face in joining certain industries, often the response is, "What are you complaining about?" The real woman hating is happening in Saudi Arabia or Africa. Since we're not violently oppressing you, you should be happy. Not only does this allow for an expression of beliefs of ethnocentrism, wherein one's own culture is seen as being inherently superior, but it implies that misogyny itself is inherent to other cultures.
So every time I ask a South Asian immigrant man, like if he likes that he moved overseas or if he misses home terribly, the general consensus is always that he misses home so much because back home there's always people to take care of things if things go wrong, that there's always people to do things for you, and that life is generally much simpler and easier. Then they act terribly surprised that you don't feel the same way about the place that you came from. Of course, I don't miss home. I am a woman. You know how many times when I was back home, I could walk the streets safely, wearing whatever I want, and have no man bother me or leer at me? You know how many times? Zero. That's how many times. And I grew up in a big city. And they say with their big chest, like there's always people taking care of things back home. There's always someone to do things for you. More often than not, it's your mothers or some woman in your life. If you're from an upper middle class family, it's going to be the maid. Things are not magically getting taken care of. Somebody is doing them for you. So of course you miss your culture, a culture that is so deeply rooted in misogyny and patriarchy, and that you happen to be the biggest beneficiary of it. But don't even, especially around me, for 2 seconds, toot your own horn, especially around white people. Going around saying that my culture is the best, you always have the people to do things for you, things are so much easier. You like it because it benefits you. You don't miss the culture, you miss the privilege that it grants you. So
Combine this with a sudden reversal, wherein liberal and left-leaning institutions attempt to implement cultural relativism in respect to cultures previously treated as inferior. And what you get is hypocrisy, such as in the University of Oxford's museum.
Oxford Museum, called Pitt Rivers, have removed an African mask in their display because the culture it came from forbids women from seeing it.
I barely believable this, but then again it is Oxford. The mask made by the Igbo? Igbo. Oh, that's an I. There we go. It's made by the Igbo people in Nigeria, and I'm so sorry for women looking at this because I've made a terrible cultural taboo. Women, avert your eyes, please, look elsewhere.
Okay, I'm not looking,
We're
I'm not
showing the
looking.
mask. Oh, goodness me. I'm sure Ofcom will now be on our backs for breaching all sorts of cultural problems. But of course, it would originally have been used in male-only rituals in Nigeria.
Right, so this follows new policies from the museum in the interest of cultural safety. Now, that's an interesting term, isn't it, Tom? What do you suppose that cultural safety means?
Cultural safety? I presume it means that people might get very angry if certain women, or just any women, are allowed to see
Problematic.
it. And maybe they're just trying to avoid protest and avoid violence, which seems like a pathetic thing.
Isn't it funny? It's supposed to be progressive, but then it leads to things that are quite the opposite.
The University of Oxford is currently showing off a collection of African items, among which is a mask made by Nigeria's Igbo people, and which was originally used in male-only rituals, which women are not allowed to see. The mask is part of a collection which the museum describes as being closely tied to British imperial expansion, and falls under a policy to ensure women do not view the mask in relation to taboos about secret ceremonies, human remains, nudity, as well as gender roles. In other words, the cultural values of the group which the artifact was taken from are being respected, instead of the commonly accepted ones of the culture where the museum is part of. Why are members of a modern and increasingly egalitarian society held to the traditions of one steeped in misogyny and woman-hating? Why is misogyny given deference and respect when it comes from another culture? As art critic and author Ruth Milligan notes, to deny all women of all cultures a sight of something because that is a taboo in one particular culture seems an extreme stance, particularly given that this country is a modern, liberal, and enlightened society. Surely women should be given the right to decide, after reading about any cultural sensitivities, if they wish to look upon the artifact or not. When it comes to art, we should all have equal rights, regardless of sex, to view what we would like to. Not to mention, the cultural sensitivities of women are never held with the same esteem. When Muslim women mention that they cannot take off their hijab in front of trans-identified males, they're called transphobic for it, and told that they are harming trans-identified males with their bigotry by doing so. Not to mention, the sudden confirmation that women do exist, and are a separate entity from men, is hypocritical in a society where self-ID exists, and anyone can identify as anything they wish, regardless of reality. We see a similar pattern of single-sex spaces being respected when it is in men's interests. such as in 2018, when a group of female protesters entered the men's pool after identifying as male. This occurred in response to Hampstead's inclusion of trans-identified males in the women's pond the previous December. However, despite the women protesters telling staff at the pond that they identified as male and said they had the right to swim there, police arrived 15 minutes later and they were forced to leave. Another example can be seen in Hooters, which, despite 2 lawsuits against the company for discrimination against men, defends only hiring female waitresses as it is necessary for the purpose of authenticity or genuineness, for an actor or fashion model. While we offer world-famous wings and burgers, the essence of our business is the Hooters girl and the experience she provides to our customers. Hooters girls are entertainers. They audition for their roles, and once hired, they must maintain a glamorous appearance and sing, dance, and engage the customers to provide a unique Hooters experience. There are plenty of porn-related subreddits, which are specifically female-only, with no claims of transphobia or bigotry still up and running. But should a woman want a female-only dating app, she'll find herself facing a lawsuit, such as in the Tickle v. Giggle lawsuit.
So we have 2 big lawsuits for women-only spaces. One in Tasmania that you guys have probably heard about, the museum called Mona, which had 1 female-only room, and this man who does not identify as transgender, literally just a man, sued them, took them to court, and he won based on their tribunal law. We like to blame colonizer misogyny so much that we just turn a blind eye to the misogyny of a lot of black and brown people and indigenous people. When I see videos about this lawsuit, there's a whole she wanted this mindset, which is so misogynistic in itself. It's so familiar. A woman gets attacked, oh, she wanted it, she's gonna use it to her benefit. That's the kind of shit that I've heard large male creators say on this app. Like, oh, this is gonna be interesting because it's fun for them to sit back and watch a man beat a woman and then say, oh, look how, just because they dressed up in a suit, because they managed to put a little pep in their step and say, hey ladies, let's fight for our rights. A bunch of women wearing suits, they're not even wearing pants, they're wearing skirts. This to the men on TikTok says they are happy that they're getting sued and that they've lost their women-only space because now they get to go to the Supreme Court and oh, she's making an art out of it. They have no fucking idea what's going on in her mind and what she's feeling. This is her husband's museum. This was their home, this was their thing, and it's been destroyed by a man. And by that tribunal council that doesn't give a shit about male and female differences. Another major battle is in Australia. That is actually the actual name. That's how serious some of these people are when they transition. And that man hasn't even transitioned. Hair on the face. Oh, I tried laser hair removal, it didn't work. I'm a woman because I wear women's clothes, because I self-identify as a woman. Wants to get onto the Giggle app created by these ladies, which is a women-only app. So we'll see what's going on with the Australians. We know the New Zealand's lost it. They, the women entrepreneur platform there was basically destroyed. New Zealand is trying to come back to the center because it went so left. So Scotland, UK, parts of Canada, a number of blue states, you cannot have women-only spaces anymore. There is no more a line that protects females from males, especially if those males decide they identify as a woman. There is no one protecting the difference between gender and sex. All these lines are being blurred. And the people who are going to be at the bottom of this new food chain is going to be the biological woman. You have already seen it. It's already been done in corn. Now it's going to be done on other levels of your life.
It seems as if cultural sensitivity isn't really what the so-called tolerant and liberal left cares about. Rather, they care about upholding misogyny because it's far less profitable to go against it than it is to support it. The core of the problem is the same as it ever was. The feelings of a few men are held over the safety and comfort of the many, because the many are women, and women do not matter to the misogynist man who only views the female sex in terms of what can be offered to him. It's simply unfortunate for this behavior to now be labeled as progressive when it most certainly is not. This, dear viewers, is where we part. I just find it very frustrating looking back that when women say, okay, well, identify as a man, that's when self-ID is just suddenly not fair. But a man can do it, and nope, not a problem. We have to accept him as one of our sisters. Anyhow, it's a very frustrating thing to witness and to go about, but I do hope that pointing it out will at least make it more obvious how hypocritical these practices are. If you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!